Hi everyone, and welcome to this landscape demonstration. I'm super excited to share this with you. This was a really fun one to do, and I say that a lot when I do these demonstrations, but I genuinely have a lot of fun doing them. And what I want you to really know about this demonstration and all the demonstrations and the way that I teach is that I'm not trying to make you a clone of me. I don't send you a perfectly polished painting for you to copy stroke for stroke. The idea is that I show you kind of the things that come up along the way and the thought process behind those. And it's really important that you can kind of overcome these obstacles. And so I come to these obstacles and I have to overcome them, so I can kind of show you the thought process behind that. And that's a really, really key ingredient to your painting process, because not everything will be perfect along the way, and it's being able to figure out how to kind of pull it back, and if a color mix isn't working, what to do. So inside my teachings, I like to offer a broad variety of subjects because it really does push your skills when you tackle these different elements in paintings. So we're going to start by looking at the image, and one of the things I like to do before I dive into the painting is just again explain the thought process behind how I've created it the way I've created it. Perhaps I've changed the composition a little bit, the format, things like that. And again, this is really important for you to be able to really understand and see that kind of process so that you can ultimately learn and put this into practice in your own pieces and not just copy me without really thinking along the way. So let's get stuck in. This is the image that we are going to be working with, and I got this from a royalty-free website. Sometimes I use my own images, sometimes I will source them. But I really wanted to put this on a square format. Now, I wanted to keep this nice and simple, so I wanted to eliminate this left-hand side. I was really interested in kind of the water and how this flowed. I loved this tree. I thought this was a really lovely focal point with the light on the side. So I felt like over here was just a bit of a distraction. Now, what I'm going to do is play around with the design. So what I do is I enlarge it into the square, and then I can move it and decide, do I want to really just focus on the trees, or do I want to bring in the water? Now, what I wouldn't do is put the tree in the complete center, because you don't really want to put your focal point right in the center as such. So I feel like it needs to go off to the side a little bit. So this is really the position that I found quite interesting, because I really loved that you had this tree on the side. I was really interested in the water down here. I loved the touches of light on these trees here. And again, I wanted to really emphasize this light. I really wanted to bring out the lovely warmth and the oranges. And I also wanted to create a lovely warmth underneath. Now the sky is very white, and what the camera can often do is over and underexpose. So your darks become darker and your lights become lighter, if not white. Now, I didn't want it to be a white. I wanted it to have some warmth underneath, which is why we will be laying a ground colour underneath, because I really want pops of that warmth to kind of show through. So for example, I wanted to bring in some kind of orange through here, and a bit more in the water just to break that up. I wanted that warm undertone in the sky, so that when I do lay some more kind of whites and purples over the top, it's not going to be as stark as this, because it just feels too stark. And these are the things that you need to think about when you're painting. You know, how can you simplify things? For example, you know, there's a lot going on with the rocks over here. So again, I will just really simplify that. And, you know, you've got obviously bits in the trees, you've got all these stems. Again, I will kind of simplify that. So you really need to just spend a bit of time with the image and really decide what it is that you want to tell. What story do you want to tell? How do you want to lead the viewer around the composition? And that is something that I really like to share when before we actually dive into the painting itself. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lay down a ground colour. Now, the reason that I like to lay down a ground colour is because I like to see pops of it coming through in the painting. And if you're working on predominantly a cool painting, so there are lots of kind of blues in here, I want to add something really warm underneath to really give that lovely glow. Now, I'm working on a small 8x8 panel, and this is just an MDF board, and I have given it a couple of coats of gesso just to seal the surface. And I'm going to start by just mixing up some yellow and red. Now, just be careful with the cadmium red. So I've got Hansa yellow and cadmium red. Now, cadmium red has a really high tinting strength, so it can swamp a colour pretty quickly. So I'm just using a nice 3/4 inch brush, and I'm just going to block that down. 1/2 inch brush, sorry. And I'm just going to just cover it all over. Don't be too precious with it. You're going to lose quite a lot of it anyway, but it's just nice to get rid of that white. I don't like the glare of the white surface. It's intimidating, and it's just easier to kind of match your colours when you've got something to work from and not just white. And I think if we can make a bold step like that straight away, it just builds your confidence a bit more because you're not worrying about ruining it really, so you can just go straight on. I'm going to dry that off, and then I'm going to show you how to use the grid method. Now, you don't have to do this, but I know that drawing for some people is a little bit of an anxiety, or they worry about getting the drawing right. So this is a really quick way to get your drawing on with a bit more accuracy if that's what you're looking for. So let's do that first. So I have the grid, and it's a really simple, so we're just going to do 2, 4, 6, and you can just scale this up depending on the surface you're working on. You'll probably find it's easier to do this flat as well, but I'm just going to do this like this just to show you. Don't put your lines in super hard because you're going to need to rub them out. And the other thing you want to make sure of, and I've seen this a lot, is to make sure that your boxes are square, because I have seen all sorts of shapes over the years, and whilst that's absolutely okay for something like a landscape, if you're doing, say, a portrait and your box is not a box, then it can be very tricky to get the accuracy. Got a very blunt pencil. A sharp pencil would also be really helpful. Okay, so we have our grid laid out, and I'm just going to, it doesn't really matter what colour you use at this stage, I am just going to lay down some Payne's grey, and I'm just going to mix in a bit of the cadmium red so that it's not super dark, just a tiny little bit of water, and then we're just going to start blocking in. So you can just put a little dot in the middle, the same on the reference if it's helpful, but we're just going to start sort of here. And again, it doesn't matter where you start from. The idea is that we're just kind of getting things laid out, and so we know where we're going. So we've got the mountains in the background here, and kind of put those down here. Now this tree here is one, we're going to treat this as one big shape. We're not going to look at the individual elements as such. We're just going to kind of map it out and get the overall. So actually this comes over a lot more here, And you can even just block it in if that is more helpful. So that, again, we'll just pop the stem or the part of the tree in here. So we're going to be blocking all this in. So don't worry if you don't get it accurate to start with. You know, it's not a big deal. Just hold the brush nice and far and loose. And this is really just going to kind of help you to stand back and just see a bit clearer where the elements are. So again, I'm not going to be painting all of this. Just really getting those larger shapes in. So we've kind of got an idea of where things lie. So we've got the edge of the water coming down here, and then this kind of verge. So again, we've kind of got this water coming down through here. And you can put a few of these in if you find that helpful, just to kind of see where the different elements fall. But we're going to be blocking this in with a bit of a value study anyway. So up here we've got kind of a bit of here, and again I'm just going to be keeping this really loose, so don't, you know, overthink it, and that's really all I'm going to be doing. Okay, so next we're going to do a value study. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is a value study. Now, unfortunately, my camera stopped working, which is not ideal. But what I've done is I've mixed up some Payne's grey and some cadmium red, and I've just thinned it with some water, and I've just started blocking in these shapes. So you can see that I've blocked in the tree shape, I've blocked in down here. This I all blocked in, and this larger shape of trees back here and through here. And then I've just added more Payne's grey, and I've just gone in at these angles. And notice how I turn my brush when I put them down, and I'm just really mapping out where my lights and my darks are. And this is just a step that I sometimes like to do because it really helps you to see where your lights and darks are. It helps you to map out the shapes before going in with any kind of detail. So I will literally just go through and block in those different areas. So again, just Payne's grey and a little bit of water and the cadmium red. And then I can just, again, I can re-establish some of those darker parts of the trees. So again, this is just really going to help to add depth to your painting, because we really need our darks to be dark enough that they give you that depth and form, and it's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with. So if we can get this down to begin with, it's really, really helpful. So I'm just kind of putting in, I'm not too worried about getting the shapes too perfect. You know, I'm just kind of blocking these in. So that's the first thing that I want you to do. Once you've done that, is to just dry it off, and then we can start with the colour. Okay, now I have put some medium out, and I'm going to start mixing up a warm green. And now my palette can get a little bit messy. It's just unfortunately the way I work. I'm just using a bit of medium, and I'm going to grab some yellow. Now just be generous with your mixes, and I say this because when you're generous with your mixes, you can go back into the mix and tweak it a little bit, and it doesn't dry out quite so quickly. And that can be one of the frustrating things, particularly if you're working with acrylics. So I'm just adding Some more Payne's Grey. Now Payne's Grey and Hansa Yellow make a really lovely green, and I'm just going to reduce the saturation and just warm it through a bit with some of the cadmium red. Notice how I kind of pull it off to the side, and why I do that is because it allows me to have some of these other mixes that I can dip into. So I'm just going to start kind of blocking in some of these trees in the background. Again, I'm just keeping it really loose. I don't want to go in with too much depth or detail rather. And I'm going to use a bit of that in the tree. Use a little bit of that in the water. Okay, so I'm going back into that yellow mix. And again, I can just kind of put a few bits here and there. So I'm just blocking in those larger areas. And we'll lose quite a bit of this, but this is just helping us to kind of get that into the background. Okay, so now I'm going to mix up some of the cadmium red and the yellow. And I'm not worried that my brush isn't clean. I actually want to bring in a bit of that kind of muddy colour. So again, just kind of blocking in some of those lighter parts. Now we want to always make sure we establish the whole painting and not just parts of it, because this is going to help us to really judge our colours more effectively, and it creates a bit more unity when we can kind of see everything going on. So I'm going to bring a little bit of that into the water. So wherever you see it, pop it down. This is really important, and not just to kind of establish one particular area, because if you establish one particular area, at the time you move on, everything looks different, and you know, you want to bounce your colours around. This is something I teach quite a lot of. You know, and in my communities, you know, we work on different subjects, and again, because they push you into pushing yourself and trying things that you know that you might not have tried, so it's really important to kind of push yourself as an artist. So again, I'm just, you know, you'll notice that we just lift things very gradually. You know, we don't want to go in too quick. So I'm going to leave that now, and I'm going to start bringing in some of the mountains and the sky. I'm going to lay out a bit of phthalo blue. And some white. Now, how you lay your palette out is a personal thing. Now, you can either lay them on, I would always make sure that I lay my colours on the outside. You can lay them warm to cool, so I will sometimes try and keep my lighter colours from my darks, and sometimes I'll just put them anywhere, if I'm being honest, which is kind of what I've done today. So I'm just going to grab some red, and I'm going to grab some blue and some white. So you've got this lovely warm colour. And I'm just going to kind of pop that. It's very dark, but that's fine because we're going to come in and tweak that in a bit anyway. And I'm going to just kind of lay some of that down here. And then we've kind of got a bit on some rocks, so I'm going to just kind of put a few bits there as well. I'm going to add some more red. Just really dragging the brush. So I'm just using a flat number 10 brush, very inexpensive brush. I'm just going to grab a bit of Payne's grey and a bit of red. I'm just going to pop some of that into a bit of white. See, sometimes when you put it down, I added way too much white, so I'm just going to go back to the Payne's grey and the red. And I'm just holding my brush nice and loose, and I can even bring a bit of that down into the trees. So again, just kind of bouncing that colour around a little bit. And a bit in this rock face. And then I'm just going to add a bit of white. So again, a lot of these colours will change as we move around and start tweaking things. Some will stay the same. So I just love that orange, you know, as it pokes through. So now I'm going to get my lightest light in. So I'm going, or start to, so I'm just adding a lot more white. So again, I can just kind of lay it over the top of what I did earlier. Just add a little bit of medium. And that just really thins the paint down a bit so that you can not go on so heavy. Again, I can change the angle of my brush if I want some kind of thinner marks. Might just bring in a bit more red. See how quickly we're establishing the picture without all the detail? You know, that can come later if you want to add detail in. It just doesn't need to be in those early stages. So I'm just breaking up this water a bit here. Okay, now I'm going to go into the sky. So I'm going to add a big scoop of white. So make sure you're very generous when it comes to the sky because there's quite a bit there. But I don't want it to be white like the picture because it's a bit stark. So I'll kind of bring in some of this lovely red, and I'll also have bits that are a bit more on the blue side. So let's just start blocking that in. So now we can kind of chip away at the tree a bit here as well. You know, we don't need we don't want lots of dots going through, but we can just break up some parts of it. Start to establish that shape a bit more. And we'll bring more of the tree in, so don't worry too much if it looks a bit speckled, that's fine. So I'm just kind of working around these mountains, but I'm keeping it very loose. So I don't want them to be sharp, sharp. That's the technical term, sharp, sharp. See how that orange is just glowing through the painting? It's just so wonderful to add a ground colour, particularly so early on, because it just lets everything bounce. It's lovely. So again, I don't want to cover it all up, but just starting to kind of put that down. Nice broad strokes, changing the angle of your brush, leaving little bits of it come through, cover some bits up, because again, you don't want it to be that kind of speckled effect. And whilst I've got that on my brush, I'll kind of pop it down in other areas of the painting. Kind of little bits here and there. And I can add a bit of medium and just really thin it down, and I can kind of glaze over to lighten some of these areas without completely losing the colour. Now, you don't normally glaze with white, but there are circumstances where you can do that and kind of still keep that colour underneath. So it's just such a wonderful way to work, and I just love the approach of just letting yourself go and having the confidence to just put something down, because at the end of the day, it is just paint. And acrylic, you know, we can cover things up, we can change things that aren't working, and sometimes you just get those lovely happy accidents. But we won't get those if we don't allow ourselves to try and just go for it. Yeah, that's nice. So again, I'm just going to grab a little bit of that almost white, kind of just pop a few little sparkles in the water. Right, so let's start bringing in some of these greens. So again, I can go back to my green mix. If you haven't got it, we've got the Payne's grey and the yellow. So a nice big scoop of yellow. And we can start. So that is pretty garish. So I'm going to add a bit more yellow, and I'm just going to add a little bit of cadmium red, just a small amount, just to warm it up. So just a bit more cadmium red. I like to always mix my greens. I don't use tube greens because they can be very stark. So just a few spots here and there. Maybe just a smidge over here, not a lot though. Okay, give our brush a good clean. And we're going to start bringing in some of that deep colour. So let's grab some of the cadmium red and a little bit of blue. Just a little bit of blue because we want to keep that lovely red. So again, we can bring some of that down here. And anywhere else you sort of feel like it would work. So now I'm going to add some of the red and the yellow. But again, what I'm doing is I'm just gradually working my way up to those brights. I don't want them to come in too quick. We're really kind of establishing everything else. If we get there too soon, we'll kind of lose it. We need everything else to support what's happening. So again, I don't want to be too over the top of this tree. I really want to kind of keep it fairly loose. I love that orange glow coming through here. It's nice. Don't want to lose too much of that. So again, I can kind of glaze over some of these greens a bit as well and just push them back. Okay, now let's go full throttle. Let's add some big scoop of yellow and some of that lovely red. So you can be as you know, if you want to do a bit more to the tree, you can. This is your painting. It's up to you how you do it. I will show you how I approach it, and then it's up to you to kind of change it if you feel like you want to do that. And I really do encourage that. If you like to work a certain way, then why not? So I'm just darting the colours around a bit again, you know, just where I sort of feel like it will work or I see it, you know, I just bring bits of it. Just breaking up the flatness of the water. So again, I'm just getting that beautiful light on top. So another big scoop of yellow and some red. I'm going to add a little bit of white this time just to increase the opacity so that we can lay it down a bit heavier and then we can always come back in and re-establish the colour a bit later on if we lose it. Because what happens with white is it reduces the saturation, so we lose the colour. You end up with a very pastel colour, And so what we need to do to bring that back, but we need the opacity to be able to layer, but what we do is we bring that back a bit later on through glazing. So I'm just popping some of this into the water. Some little bits over here. Again, just capturing that lovely light. Such a beautiful light. A few little spots over here, but it's mostly this side where the light is. I'm just adding a bit more yellow. So again, we just keep going over those areas and just lifting that colour. So it might feel a bit pastel-y at this stage, but as I say, we'll come back in and we will re-establish that colour. So again, I'm just kind of darting the brush around, getting that lovely glow. Making sure I step back. It's important to step back so that you can really see how it's working as a whole. I'm pretty happy with that. So I actually really like the sky. It's got that, because it's got the orange underneath, it's got a really lovely warm glow, and I don't want to completely lose that. So I'm going to just clean my brush off and I'm going to allow that to dry. And I'm going to just come back, just grab this white with a bit of medium, so it's just not too heavy, and I'm just going to kind of go in through here a bit. Just be careful, white can be very domineering. I'm just going to add a little bit of red. Just giving us that feeling of the mist. So again, we can chip into the trees a bit to kind of get that shape. But again, I don't want to be too literal. I want to keep it nice and loose. Just maybe a little bit more in the sky. I always love seeing the different interpretations from my students of the different demonstrations that we do. I mean, we do demonstrations, we do challenges, we have sessions together. You know, it's just such a lovely community, and it's just such a lovely way to learn with other people. I'm just going to grab a little bit of red. And a bit of white. See, I don't want to lose that warmth in the sky, and I feel like as I'm starting to build up too much more white, it's kind of starting to lose it a bit. So I just want to be a bit mindful of that, not to get too carried away. It's very easy to get carried away, especially if you're enjoying something. I'm just grabbing a little bit of white. Just a couple of little more sparkles on the water, I think. And I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to the red. And just really pop that in a few spots. Okay. Right, let's bring in some more. Now that should be dry. Let's bring in some more. Just make sure your mix is clean. It's not got green in it. If it's got green in it, it's going to reduce the saturation of the red because it's opposite on the colour wheel. And that is how we can easily end up with muddy colours. So just make sure your water's clean, your brush is clean, and your mixes are clean. So I'm just adding more red. Just gradually building that up. Sometimes you have to just tweak it a little bit, so I might add just a bit more red. So the shape of the tree might be more important to you, and if you want to, if it's a tree that you know or see often and you want to get that in, that's absolutely fine. So again, just adding a few little touches here and there in the water. So just tweak your mix. So I'm just adding a bit more red. So I can cut into the tree now, and that's going to kind of give me the shape. And I'm going to bring that into the centre, because again we've kind of lost, or I've kind of lost that. Painting is just really a succession of problem solving. You're, trying to get to what it is that you want to say, and sometimes it comes really easily, and sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. So I'm just mixing up. I'm just going to thin that down quite a bit, and just put a few of these in. Just put a bit more of that dark in there. I love that strip of orange coming through here. I don't want to lose that. Just grab a little bit of white. Just using a round brush. Putting a few little touches here and there. So I'm going to just darken some of this just a bit. So my red and my Payne's grey, a bit of medium just to thin it down. So I can kind of calm some areas down if I want to. Just give my brush a clean. I'm just going to mix up some more of the Payne's grey and red. So it's a kind of a back and forth, like you will have bits in, and then you take bits away and you layer on top and you add bits in. And that is really kind of what painting is. It's just making marks and building them up. So here I'm just giving the impression of a few rocks, but I'm not going to paint all the rocks. It's not what I do. I can kind of glaze in the top of that mountain again. Rain is coming down thick and fast. So yeah, now it's just a case of deciding, is there anything else that you want to say, or is there anything else you want to add? I think I'm just going to put just a few more touches of light, and I think I'll probably call that one finished. But I do say that and then I carry on and carry on, so we'll see. I don't want to speak too soon. So I'm adding some more yellow, and I'm just adding some more white. Just gives that lovely light. Okay, so I'm going to grab some red and a bit of white. Now I like to kind of dark colours around a bit, even if they're not there. So I'm just going to grab a bit of cadmium red and a bit of white. And I'm just going to kind of put this in a few little spots here and there. Not too much. And then I'm going to grab some yellow. Okay, I'm going to just do a little bit with those mountains, and I think we can probably say that's finished. So I'm just adding some red, some Payne's grey. Actually, no, I'm going to add some blue. So some red, bit of blue. And then a little bit of white. Just to carry on with that mist effect. And I'm going to grab some white. And just break up that shape just a little bit. And then I'm just going to grab some white on its own and a bit of medium. And I'm just going over the top again, just to really sort of push those mountains back a bit. It's got that lovely misty effect. Okay, and I think the only other thing I will do is just to mix up a little bit of the other colours and just break this up in the distance just a smidge. And then I'm just going to get a bit of white. With a bit of yellow. I don't want to detract from everything else. That's too garish. Let me grab some yellow and some red. It's kind of not in keeping, so I'm just going to go over that. So again, we sort of try these things and then we can see, yes, that worked, or no, that didn't work. And I'm just going to add a bit more yellow and a bit more red. Okay, so now we've lightened that, I want to go in and brighten up some of those oranges just a bit. So again, nice scoop of yellow, bit of red. And I'm just using the end of my brush to kind of put those down. So I'm just stepping back, and I feel like this area here now has just got a little bit too much. So again, I'm just going to mix up some Payne's grey and a bit of yellow and a little bit of red. And I'm going to just kind of push some of that back a bit. Like I say, it's all a sort of a, you know, process, and it's all, just because something's in the picture, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in the painting, or maybe it's something that we just need to change a bit. I'm just going to get a bit more Payne's grey. Just going to pop a little bit of blue into that mix. That's better. So now I'm just going to bring in a bit more of the red and the yellow. And it will sort of mix in with the greens just a bit, that's fine. Just a bit more yellow and red. And then I'm just going to mix up some red and some blue, bit of medium. So again, we can just kind of bring those rocks back in a bit. And then a little bit of white, and we're getting there. You see what I mean? How, you know, sometimes you can make a decision and it's not always the right one, and that's fine. Like, that is really part of the process. You know, even after, you know, over 20 years of painting, you still make a move that it doesn't always pan out, and you have to kind of correct it, and that's part of the process, which is why when I do my demonstrations, I don't practice them, I don't over polish them or anything like that, because it's not true to life, and you need to see where mistakes happen, and then learn how to rectify them yourself, because that is really part of the process. And if you don't know how to do that, then it can be tricky. So if I present you a very polished demonstration of everything that went perfectly, you just won't learn as much. You learn more from the mistakes, fixing mistakes, than you do from everything working just perfectly. Okay, so I'm just going to again mix up a bit of yellow and a bit of red, and I'm just going to bring a bit more back in here and there. Just warm that up a bit more. Just popping a little bit over here. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that now, after that little blunder. So I'm just going to mix up a bit of red and cadmium red again, a bit of medium. It's just breaking up some shapes. And I'm going to add a bit of white again, and a bit more red. So again, just to break up the shape down here. Okay, I think we can call that one done. So that was a lesson really in letting yourself go, loosening up, trying things, being bold enough to make a mistake and learn how to rectify it. I don't want to show you something fully polished, because that's not true to life. Being an artist is about problem solving. It's about trying something and learning how to change it if it doesn't work. So hopefully you enjoyed that process, and yeah, happy painting.